Hey friend, welcome back to the English Pod community. I'm so glad you're here with me today. If you're learning English, and especially if you've ever felt nervous, stuck, or completely frozen when trying to speak to a native speaker, then this episode is for you. Because today, I'm sharing a story that's incredibly personal and also incredibly common. We're going to talk about the first time I ever had a real conversation, face to face, with a native English speaker. And no, it didn't go perfectly. In fact, I made some mistakes. I forgot some words. At one point, I even thought, why did I do this to myself? But something else happened too. Something important. Something that completely changed my relationship with the English language. So in this episode, we're going deep. I'll walk you through what happened, what I felt, what I said, what I learned, and how that moment shaped the way I practice English today. We'll talk about the fear, the hesitation, the voice in your head that says, you're not ready. But we'll also talk about courage, progress, and what it really means to speak. Not just to know English, but to use it. And don't worry, this isn't just a story. Along the way, I'll give you tips, lessons, and small steps you can take right now to prepare for your first or next conversation with a native speaker. Because here's the truth. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a huge vocabulary. You need something simpler and stronger. The willingness to try. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's begin. Let's rewind a bit. Before that first conversation even happened, I want to be honest with you. I was terrified. Not just nervous. Terrified. Every time I imagined talking to a native speaker, my stomach twisted. My hands got cold. My brain would run wild with 100 what-ifs. What if they don't understand me? What if I freeze and forget everything I know? What if I sound weird, or my accent is too strong? What if I make a grammar mistake, and they laugh? These thoughts weren't just small worries. They became loud voices in my head that stopped me from trying. I remember walking past tourists in my city, native English speakers, and I wanted so badly to say something, even just, hi, or do you need help? But I couldn't. Something held me back, and that something was fear. The fear of being judged, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of not being enough. And maybe you've felt that too. Maybe you've studied for months or even years. But when it's time to open your mouth and speak, your confidence disappears. You're not alone. The fear before your first real conversation is very real. But here's what I want you to remember. Fear is not a stop sign. It's a signal. It means you care. It means you're about to grow. And I'll tell you what helped me push past that fear. But first, we've got to walk through the moment that changed it all. Are you ready? Because in the next chapter, it finally happens. All right, let's talk about where I was in my English journey when this conversation happened. Because this part really matters. At the time, I would say my level was somewhere between intermediate and upper intermediate. On paper, I knew a decent amount of grammar. I could write essays or messages that looked correct. I'd memorized vocabulary lists. I had passed a few English exams. So if someone had looked at my English on paper, they might have said, "Wow, you're doing great." But speaking? That was a completely different story. I rarely spoke out loud, and when I did, it was mostly in class, reading from a book or answering a question with 1 or 2 sentences. I could understand written English pretty well, but when people spoke naturally, fast, with slang, different accents, I struggled. A lot. And I know many of you listening might be in the same place. You've studied hard. You can understand English when it's slow or written down. You know the grammar rules. maybe even better than some native speakers. But when it's time to actually speak, everything freezes. The words get stuck. You hesitate. You second-guess every sentence. That was me, too. And that's why this first conversation felt like a big mountain to climb. But you know what? It also became a turning point. Not because I was fluent, but because I was willing to try, even at that imperfect level. So if you're feeling like your passive skills are strong but your speaking is weak, don't worry. You're not broken. You're just ready for the next step. And that step is real-world practice. And in the next chapter, I'm going to take you to the moment that changed everything. The very first conversation with a native speaker that helped me finally move forward. Remember the exact place. A small cafe just around the corner from the language center I used to visit. I wasn't planning to speak to anyone that day. Honestly, I was just there for a cup of coffee and maybe a little people watching. My notebook was open, headphones in, English podcast playing, my usual routine. Safe, comfortable. But then, the moment came. A man, probably in his 30s, American accent, sat down at the table next to mine. He glanced over, smiled, and said, "Hey, are you studying something?" Just 7 words. And yet, those 7 words made my entire brain freeze. My heart started racing. My palms got sweaty. I panicked. All of those English lessons, vocabulary lists, grammar drills, suddenly, they vanished. My brain felt empty. I had no script, no perfect answer prepared. This was real. He looked at me kindly, waiting for a response. And deep down, I knew this was it. This was the moment I'd been avoiding. The first real conversation with a native speaker. I took a breath, and I said, "Yes, I'm learning English. Simple, not perfect, but honest." My voice cracked a little, but I said it. And he smiled again and said, "That's awesome. I can tell you're doing great." That line, "You're doing great," made me want to cry. Not because I believed it, but because someone gave me space to try. I'll never forget how powerful that moment was. I didn't plan it. I didn't feel ready. But it happened, and it changed me. So here's the truth. Sometimes the most powerful steps in language learning are the ones you don't expect, and the ones you almost run away from. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how that conversation unfolded. The good, the awkward, and the surprising lessons I took from it. Stay with me. So there I was, sitting across from a real native speaker, still recovering from the shock of being spoken to. I had just managed to say, "Yes, I'm learning English," and he smiled back at me. But then, he kept talking. He said something like, "That's really cool. I always admire people who learn languages. It takes a lot of effort." His tone? Friendly, warm, casual. His pace? Natural, not slow, but not super fast either. But to my ears, it felt fast and real. He wasn't using textbook English. He wasn't saying, "What is your name?" or "How are you today?" He was using real-life phrases, words like admire, takes effort, cool. And here's what happened in my mind. Total panic. I heard the words, but they came at me like a wave. I caught bits and pieces. I knew what cool meant. I'd heard admire before, but takes effort? My brain was still translating, trying to piece it all together while smiling politely and nodding like I understood everything. Inside, though, I was thinking, say something, anything. Just don't sit there like a statue. I wanted to reply, but my brain was searching for the words, like trying to grab butterflies in the dark. I was thinking in my language first, then trying to translate, then rearrange it to sound correct. And by the time I had something ready, He was already saying the next sentence. But here's the thing. He wasn't expecting perfection. He was just having a conversation. I was the one putting all the pressure on myself. That moment taught me something huge. When you're in a real conversation, it's not about getting every word perfect. It's about responding, even if it's simple, even if it's not grammatically perfect. So I took a deep breath and said, "Yes, it's sometimes hard, but I like it." He nodded. "Yeah, I get that. That's how I felt learning Spanish." Wait, he understood me, and he related to me. That tiny moment of connection, it erased so much fear. Because now I wasn't just a learner. I was a person having a conversation. Coming up in the next chapter, I'll tell you exactly what helped me move from frozen silence to a real back-and-forth exchange, and how you can do the same. There's always that one moment, the kind you remember clearly, even years later. For me, it happened just 5 minutes into my first real conversation with a native speaker. We had broken the ice, exchanged a few words, and I felt a tiny spark of hope. But then I said something, and it all went wrong. He asked me a simple question. "So, how long have you been learning English?" And I panicked, completely. I wanted to say, "I've been learning for about 2 years." But instead, what came out of my mouth was something like, "I learn English since 2 years." The moment those words slipped out, I saw it. That tiny pause, the polite confusion in his eyes. He didn't interrupt. He didn't laugh. But I knew he didn't understand. And that hit me hard. It felt like failure, like everything I'd studied. The grammar books, the vocabulary lists, the hours of practice had collapsed in one clumsy sentence. My cheeks burned. My confidence? Gone. I wanted to disappear. I froze. I didn't know what to say next, so I just smiled nervously and looked down. My brain? Blank. My heart? Racing. I felt like I had disappointed him. Worse, I had disappointed myself. But here's what I learned from that moment. It's not the mistake that matters. It's what you do after. That little flop taught me more than any perfect sentence ever could. It taught me that communication is messy, that sometimes you'll get it wrong. But if you keep showing up, if you keep trying, people will meet you halfway. That native speaker? He smiled, gently corrected me. "You mean you've been learning for 2 years?" And the conversation moved on. That one sentence, his kindness, not the correction, changed everything for me. So if you've ever frozen, flopped, or felt like a failure in a conversation, remember this. Those moments aren't the end. They're the beginning of real growth. And they're more common than you think. Next, I'll tell you how I turned those moments into practice opportunities. And how you can too. Stick with me. After that awkward moment, when I froze and flopped, I had two choices. One, never speak again and go back to just studying in silence. Or two, take a deep breath and keep going. I chose the second one. And looking back now, I'm so glad I did. Because in that exact moment of discomfort, I discovered something powerful. The tools that helped me push through. The first one? Simple phrases. I stopped trying to say fancy sentences. Instead of worrying about grammar perfection, I leaned into what I could say. Phrases like, "Can you say that again, please?" "I'm still learning, but I'd love to try." "Let me think for a second." Those little phrases became my safety net. I memorized them, practiced them, used them. They gave me a moment to breathe, to slow down, and to connect. Not perfectly, but confidently. The second thing? Breathing. It sounds basic, but seriously, when your heart's pounding and your brain's racing, A deep breath can reset everything. I'd pause, breathe in slowly, and remind myself, it's okay. You're learning. And the third? Smiling. Yes, just smiling. It changed the energy of the conversation. It told the other person, I'm trying, I'm open, I'm friendly, and most of the time, they smiled back. That moment of connection? That's what English is really about. So if you've ever felt like giving up mid-conversation, or felt embarrassed by a mistake, remember this. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a huge vocabulary. You just need the courage to keep going. Your message matters more than your mistakes. Next, I'll tell you how I turned everyday conversations into real learning moments, and how you can do it too. Let's keep going. So after that shaky beginning, after the awkward silence and my not-so-perfect sentence, I waited for their reaction. Honestly, I was expecting confusion, or even judgment, but instead, something amazing happened. They smiled. Not a fake smile. A real, warm, patient smile. And then they did something I didn't expect. They slowed down. They adjusted their words, repeated what I didn't understand, and not once did they make me feel stupid. In fact, they seemed impressed that I was even trying. That moment changed everything. I stopped panicking. My shoulders relaxed. I wasn't focused on grammar rules anymore. I was focused on the conversation. I started answering, not perfectly, but clearly. And the more we talked, the easier it felt. The words started coming, not from my textbook memory, but from me, my real voice. We laughed about a silly mistake I made. We talked about food, about places we'd traveled. And somewhere in between those simple, human moments, I forgot to be afraid. That's when it hit me. Native speakers aren't waiting for you to be perfect. They're just waiting for you to speak. They want connection, not a grammar test. They want you, your ideas, your voice, your stories. So, if you're listening right now and worrying that your English isn't good enough to talk to native speakers, let me tell you, it is. If you can listen, smile, and share what's in your heart, you're already fluent in what matters most. Now, let's talk about the powerful lessons I took away from that first real conversation and how they completely changed the way I learn. During that first conversation, I heard a few phrases that I'd never really practiced before, at least not in a real context. And hearing them from a native speaker, it made them stick. One of the first was, "Oh, no worries." It happened when I said something wrong and quickly apologized. I said, "Sorry, my English isn't very good." And they smiled and said, "Oh, no worries." That short phrase, just 3 words, made me feel calm. It means it's okay, or don't worry about it. It's a common way English speakers make others feel relaxed. Another one was, "You're doing great." Simple, but powerful. They said it with warmth, and I knew it wasn't just polite, it was encouraging. I realized how powerful words can be when said kindly. And finally, I totally get that. They said this when I talked about how hard it was to learn English without many people to practice with. I totally get that means I understand completely. It felt like connection, not correction. Let's practice together, right now. Say it out loud with me. No worries. You're doing great. I totally get that. Beautiful. The magic of hearing real phrases in real situations is they don't just teach you language. They teach you confidence. Keep your ears open in every conversation. The best English lessons don't come from books. They come from people. Now, let's pause for a moment. Not to talk about what went wrong, but what I actually did right in that first conversation. Because here's the truth. Even though I was nervous, even though my voice was shaking a little, I spoke. I used a full sentence. I asked a real question. And guess what? It worked. I remember saying, "Is this your first time here too?" And the native speaker understood me right away. They smiled and answered back like it was the most normal thing in the world. And that moment, it changed everything. I realized I didn't have to be perfect to be understood. I just had to be clear, simple, and brave enough to try. So here's a reminder for you, my friend. Celebrate your wins, even the small ones. Maybe today you said one sentence in English to a stranger. Maybe you asked for directions or ordered a coffee. That counts. That's growth. Fluency isn't one giant leap. It's hundreds of small steps. And every step deserves a little celebration. Now, let's talk about the part we usually try to avoid. The mistakes. Oh yes, I made them. During that first conversation, I remember mixing up tenses. I said something like, went to the museum yesterday, instead of I went. The moment I said it, I knew it sounded wrong, but it was already out there. I also pronounced a few words strangely, and there were these awkward, silent pauses where I couldn't find the next word. My brain was running, but my mouth felt stuck. And, yeah, I was embarrassed. But here's the important part. I survived. The native speaker didn't laugh. They didn't judge me. They kept listening. They even gently corrected me at one point, and I nodded, smiled, and kept going. That moment taught me something powerful. Mistakes are not the end. They're the beginning. They're not failures. They're feedback. If I hadn't made those mistakes, I wouldn't have known what to improve. So if you're afraid of sounding wrong, I get it. But I promise, making mistakes is part of the journey. And every time you mess up, you're actually moving forward. When the conversation finally ended, I remember just standing there. It was like everything around me slowed down. The noise of the cafe faded, my hands were still slightly shaky, and my heart was pounding. Not out of fear anymore, but out of relief. And something else, too. A strange mix of disbelief and pride. I took a deep breath and thought, wait, I actually did it. I had just spoken to a native English speaker for the first time. In real life, not a classroom, not a language app. I had used the English I'd been learning for years, and while it wasn't perfect, not even close, it was real. Of course, there were moments when I hesitated. I made some mistakes. I even said something completely wrong. I think I used the wrong verb tense or mispronounced comfortable. But you know what? The other person didn't care. They didn't correct me rudely. They smiled, nodded, and kept the conversation going. That kindness, it meant everything. And as I walked away, I felt this unexpected wave of emotion rising inside me. I wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. Not because the conversation went perfectly, but because I had faced one of my biggest fears, and I didn't let it stop me. That conversation changed how I saw myself. Before that moment, I thought fluency was something far away, something for people who studied abroad, or had perfect pronunciation, or memorized thousands of words. But that day I realized, fluency starts the moment you stop hiding, the moment you open your mouth, even if your voice shakes. So, if you've ever walked away from a chance to speak because you were too nervous, I understand. I've been there. But let me tell you something. The confidence you're looking for, it's not waiting for you inside a textbook. It's waiting on the other side of that first conversation. And once you have that moment, even if it's messy, you'll never be the same. Looking back, that one conversation taught me more than any grammar book ever could. It didn't just show me what I needed to improve. It changed how I saw the entire learning journey. And today, I want to share the 3 biggest lessons that came from that moment. Lessons that still guide me every time I speak English. Lesson 1. Native speakers aren't scary. For the longest time, I had this fear, this image in my head that native speakers would judge me, laugh at my accent, or get impatient if I made a mistake. But in reality, most of them are kind, curious, and supportive. They don't expect perfection. They appreciate effort. And the moment I realized that, it felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. I stopped seeing them as scary native speakers and started seeing them as just people. People I could connect with. Lesson 2. Speaking is messy, and that's okay. I used to think I had to prepare every sentence in my head before I said it, but conversations don't work like that. They're fast, unpredictable, sometimes even awkward, and that's normal. You pause, you forget a word, you laugh, you correct yourself. That's all part of speaking. It's not about being perfect. It's about being understood. And the sooner I accepted that, the easier it became to enjoy the process. Lesson 3. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes from action. This was the biggest shift for me. I kept waiting to feel confident before I spoke. But I realized the only way to build confidence is by doing the thing you're afraid of, again and again. Every conversation, no matter how small, became practice. Every mistake became progress. And slowly, day by day, the fear started to fade. So if you're still holding back, waiting until you feel ready, maybe this is your sign. You don't have to wait. Just start. Start small. Speak anyway. Confidence is built by speaking through the fear, not by avoiding it. So, you've heard my story, the nerves, the mistakes, the breakthrough. And maybe you're thinking, okay, I want to try too. But where do I even begin? Don't worry. Let's break this down into simple, practical steps, because your first conversation with a native speaker doesn't have to be scary. In fact, it can be exciting. Step 1. Where to find native speakers. Thanks to the internet, you don't have to travel abroad to meet English speakers. Apps like Tandem, HelloTalk, or Speaky connect learners and native speakers from all over the world. You can also try language exchange websites like conversationexchange.com or even join English-speaking groups on Facebook, Telegram, or Discord. And if you're into gaming, online multiplayer games with voice chat are full of natural, fast-paced English. Step 2. Keep it simple. You don't need to prepare a long speech. Start with basic, honest phrases like, "Hi, I'm learning English. I'd love to practice with you." Or, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk? I want to improve my speaking." And one of the best ways to build trust and connection quickly is just being open. Say, "My English isn't perfect, but I'm trying. Can we talk for a few minutes?" Step 3. Be a good listener. A great conversation isn't just about what you say, it's about how you listen. Ask questions, show curiosity, and if you don't understand something, it's totally okay to say, "Sorry, can you say that more slowly?" Or, "I didn't catch that word. What does it mean?" Let me give you a mini script you can use right away. "Hi, my name is Alex. I'm learning English, and I'm trying to practice more. Can we talk for a minute? I'd really appreciate it." Simple, clear, and honest. And if they say yes, great. If not, no worries. Try again with someone else. You're not looking for perfection. You're looking for connection. One real conversation at a time. That's how fluency is built. All right, let's take a breath and look back. You just walked through one of the most honest, powerful stories in any English learner's journey. the first real conversation with a native speaker. We talked about the fear, the freeze, the awkward moments, and the incredible feeling of breaking through. I shared how I was nervous, how I made mistakes, how I nearly gave up, but also how I grew, and how everything changed when I stopped waiting for perfect grammar and started speaking anyway. So here's your challenge. This week, I want you to take that first brave step. Find one native speaker. It could be on an app, in a group, at a coffee shop, or even online, and just say, hello. That's it. One message, one sentence, one moment of courage. You don't have to be fluent to start, but you do have to start to become fluent. And hey, if this episode helped you, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Leave a comment or review with your first English story, or even your fears before speaking. You're not alone. This is a journey we're all walking together. Let's grow, one real conversation at a time.